Thank you for joining us this evening. We are really excited that you are interested in research and that we can share a little bit about what we do with you today. I'm Lauren, and this is Emma. We're going to introduce
Hi.
ourselves and hi, and talk about what we do. Thank you for sending in any questions. Honestly, thank you, because it's not the most exciting subject in the world, but we're really grateful that you've shown an interest. So, now a lot of your questions, like I say, you've sent in a few, we've not been inundated, but a lot of your questions have been referring to how we got into our research and what we do. So, Emma, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background? So, what did you do before you started your research?
So my nursing, I've got a nursing background, clinical background in renal nursing, working for 21 years as a nurse across all the disciplines, so haemodialysis, peritoneal dialysis, home haemodialysis, and then renal transplantation. So I've got a really sound knowledge of kidney disease.
Your background is clinical, so how did you end up doing a research project?
Okay, so in November 2019, we had an email sent from Welsh Clinical Network with regards to a project that was to understand why people choose not to have a kidney transplant. And obviously, being my clinical background, it was something that straight away took an interest. I'd not long finished my advanced clinical practice masters, and a large element of the masters as well was research. So obviously a clinical pillar, a research pillar, a management pillar, but research for myself has been probably incredibly important in the background.
Sorry.
Important in the background for nursing practice, even from training in the 90s. We're always kind of encouraged to be inquisitive about our nursing practice, and obviously the project straight away took, any clinical nurse specialist in renal transplantation would probably really be interested in that particular research question. Why do people not want to have a kidney transplant? And straight away I inquired and spoke with the professor up at Bangor University, and it was awarded a scholarship.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
So, are you doing full-time research now, or do you do any clinical work at the moment?
Okay, so I full-time PhD student, but at weekends I've still maintained my clinical role and been vaccinating, being part of the mass vaccination campaign really up in North Wales. So I've been at weekends still busy trying to vaccinate as many people as we can for COVID pandemic, and I've also helped at the dialysis units locally to try and bring forward really the third doses of the COVID vaccine.
Brilliant. That sounds really good. Cool. In answer to how we came to do our research, my journey is slightly different to Emma's, and our research is completely different. So you'll get two very different perspectives on some of these questions today. But basically, I did my undergraduate degree in biomedical sciences at Cardiff Metropolitan University. And after that, I went on to do a master's degree at Cardiff University in cancer biology and therapeutics, which I really enjoyed. And from that master's program, the lecturers and the leaders of that program said that about 50% of the cohort is likely to go on to take on research or a PhD, which at the time wasn't something I was really considering. But I realised during the programme that the Masters was really geared towards preparing you for a career in research and academia. So when I came out of my Masters, I wasn't 100% sure what to do, but I actually got an email on LinkedIn from my supervisor, Rebecca Aichler. She was my supervisor for my undergraduate dissertation, and we worked really well together. We had a really great working relationship, and she emailed me saying that she had been awarded some funding through CES, which is a funding body based in Wales, that is based in knowledge exchange. So it pairs you up with a company so you can do your research project in line with a company, and mine was Kidney Wales, as was Emma's, which is really great. And she'd been awarded some funding and she was looking for some candidates to apply for this PhD, and she sort of gave me a nudge to see if I wanted to apply, and thankfully I got it. So that's how I found myself in this project. So The next sort of questions are quite similar. So this one is, how did you get into your field of research? So I guess for me specifically, like I said, biomedical science is a really broad background. You sort of cover all the different tenets of biological research, well, very, very briefly. And then I sort of specialised a bit more when I did my project in cancer research. My master's dissertation was about breast cancer, and it was based in bioinformatics, so I was never in a lab. It was all based on a computer. And then I completely changed for my PhD because my supervisor, Becky, is an immunologist, and the lab group that she worked in at Cardiff University is a viral immunology lab group that specialises in human cytomegalovirus. So there was elements of immunology and virology in my project, which I was completely unfamiliar with. So I completely changed field when I started my PhD. But I found, meeting other students, that that's quite common, that you can have things that you're really interested in and search out PhDs and projects in that field. But sometimes opportunities just sort of come your way and you think, well, I'll just have to learn on the job, which you just do.
So similar to Lauren, really. My supervisor, my professor supervisor, Jane Noyes at Bangor University, is heavily involved as well with several projects of renal research across Wales, which obviously maps nicely with the Welsh Clinical Research Unit as well. And my project is obviously supported by the Welsh Clinical Research Unit.
One question that we've got, which I think is really important to address, is what is a PhD? It's a really good question. So I kind of had a vague idea of what a PhD was before I started any sort of further education past my degree. And basically, so a PhD is a doctorate of philosophy, is its official title, like Bachelor of Science or Master of Science. A PhD is Doctor of Philosophy, is what its like official title is. But it's essentially a qualification that you're awarded for contributing something novel to knowledge, to research that's currently there. You can explain it better than me, Emma.
Yeah. So obviously, specifically with regards to my project and obviously Lauren's project, it's trying to understand where there's a gap in knowledge and trying to look to find new or understanding this knowledge gap and creating a new body of knowledge and evidence to support either an unknown question. Certainly with mine, it's more qualitative research, and where obviously Lauren's is more quantitative. So where my data will be gathered with interviews and focus groups and patient experiences, where obviously Lauren's is going to be very different with lots of lab data and things. So obviously for myself, it'll be a body of knowledge that we previously don't know, that will, as we find this new body of knowledge, will hopefully aim to improve people's lives with kidney disease.
So in terms of the logistics of what a PhD is, so you usually get funded for 3 or 4 years if you're doing it full time, and it could take years and years, depending on what your situation is. But basically, you conduct a research project that is your own. You have a supervisory team that help you and guide you, but essentially your project is your own. You're in charge of driving it and getting the data. And then at the end, you write this very scary, from my perspective, very scary, long thesis that you then have to defend in something called a viva. So you'll have experts come and sit with you who have read through your whole thesis, and you'll have to defend it. Basically, they'll ask you questions, they'll check your knowledge, make sure you really know about your project, make sure you know why you did certain things, and then if you pass your viva, then you have a PhD and you are Dr. so-and-so. So yeah, that's what a PhD is.
And really the PhD for myself, there's very few little taught elements. So it's been largely independently working, which has been no different really from my clinical background of working. So I have a lot of transferable skills really coming over from my clinical background to doing the PhD, but obviously very different from taught study.
Yeah, and from my perspective, and from the field that I'm in, someone described it really well to me when I first started, is it feels like an apprenticeship. It feels like I feel like I'm a scientist in training, basically, that I am sort of learning on the job, learning how to do different lab techniques and things like that. And I think for the field that I'm in, that's a very accurate description of what a PhD feels like. But what it is a qualification that you get at university after a master's or a bachelor's degree. And you'll be a doctor at the end of it, which is nice.
Yeah, question. So Lauren, how did you then develop your skills then that you've needed to be able to perform some of the lab work that you need to do?
So some of the very basics, like I don't know, some certain assay techniques and things like that you can learn in your undergrad. It varies for everyone. Everyone sort of comes into a PhD with a different set of skills depending on what your background is. Where a lot of people would acquire their lab skills, perhaps in a master's or in an industry year, I didn't get. So my master's, as I said, was a dry project. It was all computer based. And I never did a year in industry, whereas some people have. Some people have taken breaks out of their academic career and gone to work in a lab and gained lab experience. But basically, you just have to learn on the job. I will say, the lab group that I work in are absolutely amazing. They're so accommodating and so helpful, and they're willing to train you in whatever you need help with. You don't feel silly having to ask a question, but essentially it is that, you are responsible for your project. If you need to learn how to do this experiment, you are responsible for going to the right person who knows how to do it and asking them to show you, basically. So it can be quite intense, especially at the beginning. There was a lot of things to learn, but as I said, the lab that I'm in are really lovely, and they have trained me up well. They've given me a lot of support. So another question that people ask is, how does a research project begin, or how do you decide what to research? Now, the case is the same for me and Emma, where we didn't choose our research projects. We applied for a position, which was a fully formed project already, that was fully funded and ready to go once we'd started. That's not always the case. Sometimes a PhD student has to select their own project and develop it themselves. And for those people that created the projects for us to come into, it's the same process of reading the literature, looking around for a hole in the knowledge, like Em had said, and applying for funding by writing a grant application is usually how it works. So another question that we've got, which is really interesting, is, are you proud to be a woman in science?
I think we both coming from very different backgrounds, obviously clinical and yours with research. I think yes. It's certainly not without its challenges, but I think that would be for any background, both male and female. It's an enormous privilege to be a female that has actually been involved in research. I've been really lucky and fortunate to be an observer on a large project across Wales, the Pregnancy Choices in Kidney Disease project, which all the research study members group are all females. So it's been an enormous privilege to be actually invited to observe a larger project, but actually all involved are actually females, with a common goal. Obviously, the research project is an enormous project that we've needed to address within kidney disease, and looking at pregnancy and reproductive choices that women with chronic kidney disease make. And so that for me has been a big, certainly an enormous privilege to be part of, but certainly, very proud to be a female and in this research context. So what about yourself, Lauren?
Yeah, I'm really proud to be a woman in science. As I said, my supervisor, Rebecca Hler, she is a great role model / mentor for someone who is a female working in research. And I'm lucky enough that I'm surrounded by fantastic women working in the lab in all sorts of different positions, and throughout my scientific career, really, from undergrad, from A-level even. My biology teacher in college was Kate Bassett. She was my A-level biology teacher. She was fab and totally got me hooked on biology and going down that field. So I think that the influences that women can have in science is really important, and I'm proud to be part of it.
Yeah, and I totally echo that as well. My supervising team are all females, from Professor Noyes, Dr. Kate Shakespeare and Dr. Lee McLaughlin. And then obviously coming from a clinical background in nursing, predominantly we mostly are females, but again, I've had tremendous support from, matron, clinical manager, and then my colleagues that obviously I've now left, but, massive gratitude really to those I've met along my journey, clinical nursing journey, and then now obviously transferring over to the clinical and to the research environment. I'm very, very proud to be part of the research groups.
So now we're moving on to some questions that are a little bit more specific about what we do day to day in our research projects. So this one says, how do you keep track of samples and data? Now, I think, I don't know about your project, but I'm assuming obviously you have data and things that you need to sort of manage and keep a track of. For me, I do work with samples. I work with patient samples. I work with plasma, which is derived from patient's blood. And obviously I have mountains of data that I need to keep a track of. In terms of how I keep track of it, it's definitely been a learning curve. I wouldn't say when I started my PhD I was terribly great at computers and things like that, and I definitely had a few near misses of looking for data and looking for experiments that I've done and thinking, oh my goodness, I've lost it, or I don't know which memory stick I put that on. So I think you learn as you go what the best ways are to save all your work and back up your data, but backing up is extremely important. I have learned many times, but yeah, all of our, in terms of samples, for me, by the time a sample gets to me, it's completely anonymized. So I just have numbers and dates and things that I work with. I have many, many spreadsheets. I'm like a spreadsheet addict now. I make spreadsheets for everything because that's the only way I can keep track of all the things that I've got to do. In terms of data managing, I use OneDrive. It's really good.
Yeah, similar really to Lauren. I've learned from the very beginning, obviously coming from a nursing background, confidentiality, data and data protection, played a large part. And then obviously from the beginning of the project, making sure I've stored all the information correctly, again, OneDrive, and the Teams folders, open sharing, etc., and SharePoint. But equally, making sure that I've captured everything in large Excel tables. So my data collection so far predominantly has been literature, to looking at the background literature to base and form the project, but looking through thousands of studies, to see what meets my specific research question. So again, capturing that, ensuring really I've got a really clear history of what I've actually looked at, and making sure that I've captured everything in tables, Excel, and keeping all the documents really secure. Not quite like Lauren with a USB stick, but it's all in the laptop. Heavily protected, hopefully by Bangor University's drives, to make sure no data is lost.
Yeah, it's such a fear of losing data, because essentially that's what you have to show for yourself after 3 years of work, and losing that would be an absolute nightmare. So yeah, we do definitely keep a firm track on where our data is. Also, I feel like I need to say as well, I also have a lab book. So when you work in a lab, when you work in research, you have a lab book with you that you take. You have your protocols, you have your sort of setups of your different experiments. I have one lab book, a hard copy that I take with me to the lab that I scribble on, and then I have a sort of electronic handbook, so it's all dated with experiment that I've done, and then the results attached and things like that. So but there's lots of different ways to do it, whatever works for you. So the next question is an assumption. This assumption is, once you start working with lab samples or fresh data, you can be going to 10 p.m. at night. So I guess this question is about how, once you're doing your research, the normal working hours go completely out the window, which I don't know about you, Emma, in my experience is absolutely true. You can you could be in the lab at any time of the day or night. You know, I've come in early in the morning and found loads of people here, or even late at night. I do have one experience that was particularly bad. I was learning to do a big experiment for the first time, and it's a long one, involving lots of different elements, and there's this 5-hour wait time in the middle, but then on both sides of that there's lots of different fiddly bits and calculations and things that you have to do, and lots of different processes, and it's a notoriously long day for competent and experienced scientists. For myself, doing it for the first time, I was pre-warned, you know, this is going to be a long day, it'll take you a while, don't worry, it's your first one. And I thought, no, do you know what, I'm going to go in at 6. I'm going to have everything prepped. I'm going to do all my calculations the day before, so I don't even have to think. I just do the stuff that I need to do. And I was in the lab until 12:30 at night that night. It got to the point where, as I saw the clock going on and on and on, and it got to 12:30, I was like, oh my goodness, this is never going to end. When I finally finished, I stepped out of the lab and I called my partner and I was like, I'm finally finished. I'm going to McDonald's first. And I had to console myself with a McFlurry because it was intense. It doesn't happen every day, but it can happen a lot. You know, late nights, long hours, but it's all part of the fun.
I can't quite echo that Lauren has said. My biggest difference probably for myself is obviously all of my work so far has been from home. So obviously for myself, it's been trying to separate home and work. So I think that's probably been my biggest challenge. And then sometimes if some information comes or ideas come to my brain, I just distract and I can just go into another room and, you know, open up my my computer again and just do a little bit of work, but not quite as Lauren's experiences, working really late into the night. I'm sure that will come. I think every student has said, you know, that the long hours that will be, you know, that I'll have to put in at some points and certain points throughout the project. So yeah, I can see that probably there's going to be so many sleepless nights. Certainly, I remember that in my master's writing up my dissertation, and obviously there's a lot of write up for this. So yeah, definitely, but not quite as horrific as Lauren's experience.
Well, hopefully that was just a one-off because I was just learning. But yes, I hope it was a one-off. So the next question is, how often are you in a laboratory environment? For me, it varies based on what I'm doing. So at the moment, I'm doing some write-up of some things that I've done in the last sort of year and a bit. But generally, I'm in the lab all the time. That's my project is completely lab based. So, you know, if I have like an incubation time or a little wait time, I'll go and like do emails and things like that. But generally, I'm based in the lab all the time. As I said, at the moment, not so much because I'm writing, but I'll be going back in soon as well.
Yeah. And for myself, there's no lab, but when I will go and collect data for the project, it will then involve me going into the hospital environment and interviews with patients and staff focus groups, but obviously not lab based. It will be hospital based and study sites.
Mm-hmm. So the next question is, which part of a research project is your favourite? The practical or the write-ups, the sort of theory?
I think at the minute I've got nothing to compare with, but I'm sure probably my biggest things that I'll probably most enjoy will be the interviews. Again, clinical background, so being again with patients, which I miss tremendously. So I think definitely will be the interview side. During the write-up, obviously, it's just sometimes quite hard to actually articulate what you to write and say and express, and obviously having that academic kind of that sound kind of ability to be able to write. It's something that I will hopefully just improve on as time goes on, gain experience with.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
I don't think anyone's favourite is the write-up, to be honest. It's just a long slog. I think, my hands down is practical because it's more varied. You know, there's physical jobs to do rather than just sort of like sitting in front of your computer waiting for inspiration to come, which is what I struggle with the most. So yes, definitely practical is my favourite. The next question is for you specifically, Emma. How has the transition from a clinical nurse to a researcher been?
So really, as even a junior nurse pre-registration, we were taught really to base our clinical practice on evidence. So research played an important element from early on in my nursing career. Probably the biggest challenge has been leaving the full-time clinical role, and then obviously then completely just embracing the research project as a whole. So it has been quite a challenge. I think initially missing patients, missing colleagues, that having a really busy environment of a very noisy office, and then being home and then starting a project almost with there's very little, almost a job description with a PhD.
Yeah.
You were there, and it's your project. You need to you own the ownership of your projects. That's probably been one of the biggest challenges for myself, has been setting up the project. I've had tremendous help and support from my supervision team, and really for me it's been a little bite size and almost task complete and finished really as I've gone along.
Yeah.
Which probably suits my clinical brain really well. But yeah, it's for us ourselves within nursing practice, there's a tremendous amount of research that goes on. I've joined a small group as well, so across the UK, Association of Nephrology Nurses, and that's been great to meet up with other nurses in the renal and kidney disease environment that are all doing smaller projects or are research active or have been research active with kidney disease projects. So they come from a real mixed environment, and that's been a great for myself as well to learn from and to meet other research active nurses, all with this obviously specific interest in kidney disease.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I can imagine that starting a research project after being in such a close-knit working group might have felt quite lonely. I'm certainly grateful for the group that I have that I work with. You definitely need people when you're doing something as intense as a PhD. I think the more people around you to support you, the better. So the next question is, will it be easy to transition between research projects? So will it be easy to transition between research projects? Now, that's a really interesting question because short answer, I would say yes, it's possible. I don't think it's necessarily easy, but I definitely think it's possible. In the field of research that I'm in lab-based biological research, the techniques are the techniques. If you know how to grow cells, you know how to grow cells. If you know how to do a PCR, you know how to do a PCR. If you know how to do an ELISA, you know how to do an ELISA. So you learn as many practical skills as you can during this time in training as an apprentice, essentially during a PhD, as many transferable skills as you can. Many people come and go in the lab on various contracts or placements that have had completely different backgrounds to the one that they're currently doing. And I think that that's a really great thing about science, is that the skills are really transferable, as long as at the beginning of each project you can put in the work and learn the background and learn the theory. I think that if you put in the time to learn the skills, I think you can be well equipped to change projects. And don't get me wrong, if you spend 3 years of your life in a certain field, in a certain area of expertise, the ideal is that you use that expertise and stay in that field to grow and to contribute more to the research. But it's definitely not impossible. I've seen a lot of people do it.
I think there's some similarities as well within your specific research project as well, really, Lauren. You obviously have certain elements of your project, then you have to switch into something different. So obviously data collection for myself with the literature review, then going into the ethics, and obviously the research and development applications. So I think there are, throughout the project, there are certain things, challenges where you're having to switch from doing one element to another, and they are skills that you develop. And certainly I know skills that I've brought with me from a clinical background to this have certainly, thank goodness, been a tremendous support for what I'm doing, and then there'll be skills transferable from this onto for my future.
Yeah, definitely. Fab. Now, this is another question that we got. Do all technicians wear white coats as seen on TV? And why white? Now, this is a good question. I do wear a white lab coat when I go into the lab, and that is a requirement for safety, health and safety purposes. I have to wear a white lab coat. They don't have to be white. I've seen many different colours. I've seen dark blue ones and grey ones and all sorts. I would say they're probably mainly white, probably for a number of different reasons. Maybe back in the day it was cheaper to use white material. Maybe it was an expense thing, so you could make loads and loads of lab coats for cheap. Also, I do think that it helps with health and safety in terms of spills and messes. You can see what you've spilt on yourself, and from a health and safety perspective, if you can see the spill, then you can know if it's something hazardous, and you know what you're working with, basically. But yeah, I do wear a white lab coat most of the time that I'm in a lab.
And I don't.
Yes. So there's all varieties of different research uniforms. So there's a whole plethora of different costumes we wear. Yeah, so that's all the questions that were sent in to us. Hopefully we've answered them and shed some light on the mysterious world of scientific research. Yeah, it's been really nice going over those questions and talking about both what we're doing, Emma. It's been great.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously very different research journey so far.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Kidney Wales, for letting us share what we're both up to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers. I'm really grateful for the opportunity as well to shed light on research and talk about the projects that Kidney Wales are involved with, because they do a lot to contribute towards research, and I think it's really great that they're sharing that with the community so you can see what they're up to. I certainly am really grateful for their contributions to research. I would not be here without them. So yes, if you want to know more specifically about what my project is, I'll be doing a little video later on in the Kidney Wales calendar. So if you want to see this mug again, talking about my research project, follow them on social media.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, again, similarly here, thank you to Kidney Wales as well for letting me share with my research. There's been a recently submitted a small little blog for their Christmas calendar, which is a little bit more about me and my research project. And again, in Welsh Kidney Research Unit, there's a small part on the projects that again goes into a little bit more in depth about the specific research project that I'm doing. But thank you for letting me share my experiences today with yourself.